Okay, now I see it. Because I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to talk or say anything until I go check it myself and make sure. I stream often, so I don't worry about, like, I'm very comfortable on live streams, regardless of what I'm doing. So that's why I was like, let me go ahead and actually check and make sure I see this thing live. Because I'm going to get upset if I keep hitting live and it's not live. Okay, it looks like we're in business, guys. What's up, everybody? Good evening. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the daily live stream. My fault about that, guys. Yeah, streaming software acting kind of cray-cray on a Thursday night. Same rules of engagement as per usual, guys. When you come into the chat, say what's up, say where you're watching from, hit that like button. Don't forget to share your opinion in the chat. We care that you guys are interactive in the chat. Make sure that you keep your comments cordial, respectful, and short. Don't flag the AI mod because it's crazier than me and my mods. Make sure you do not disrespect subscribers, supporters, or mods. That's the only thing that'll get you kicked out of the chat or censored. And other than that, just enjoy the live stream, guys. I got a lot of good clips tonight that we're going to go through. So let's jump right in.
In the middle of war, sometimes all it takes is one hot meal, one plate, one smile.
Shame? Have you no shame? You run open air?
All right, shout out to Keith Edwards, a channel favorite. We react to Keith on the channel often. So he's the one who covered this with Kristi Noem possibly facing impeachment. So, yeah, and of course that's going to be just, I think it just comes from after some of those crazy comments she made about, that incident that happened with ICE out in Minnesota. People were, basically enraged. So let's take a listen to what Keith had to say. Go back here.
Oh me, oh my, Kristi Noem got heckled by some protesters, and it's going viral. Love to see it. And articles of impeachment are being drafted for this woman. Republicans all over D.C. are getting heckled.
You suck.
James Comer earlier today was heckled by what he's calling a paid disruptor. No, it's just an American who's protesting your fascism.
Maxwell attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding, so obviously
the Cartoon Network called and they want you to take your job back. Okay,
I'm trying to answer questions.
That's your retort.
Take your job back. The Cartoon Network called and they want you to take your job back. Okay?
The Cartoon Network called and they want you to take your job back. Ooh.
I mean, it's so stupid, but it's also, I'm like, man, that's disrespectful. Like, Cartoon Network, couldn't even say, I don't even know which one's worse, Nickelodeon. But that was just crazy.
Trying to answer questions. We've got a paid disruptor here. So this is, I feel like the Clintons have initiated the war room. The press yesterday was pretty fair, I think, about Bill Clinton not coming. Because, again, this was a bipartisan.
All right, what they're trying to do is get Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton in to be interrogated by the House over Epstein. And, of course, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton said, go fuck yourself. Ron Filipkowski said this, so smart. I'm actually very happy for James Comer and House Republicans to establish the precedent that former presidents should be hauled before congressional committees to be questioned about Epstein pardons and other matters. I agree. Like, sure. Okay. Bring them in because guess what? There's a lot of people we can bring in too. Now, Thomas Massey was also heckled yesterday, and the difference is he actually posted it because he was like, you think this is ambushing me?
How's it going? Thank you. So, Congressman, in the last two...
I'm not going to lie. This comment that Thomas Massey made, he gets some respect from me here because I just want you guys to pay attention to this comment. He talks about that he votes Republican 91% of the time, and then he has an answer for the other 9%.
2 weeks, you repeated AOC's talking points in Venezuela, and Jasmine Crockett has retweeted you. When will you change your party affiliation to Democrat?
I thought you knew. I vote with Republicans 91% of the time. And the 9% I don't, they're taking up for pedophiles, starting another war, or bankrupting our country.
I mean, that is kind of a baller response. Much better than, how does it work for the Cartoon Network? All right. I'm also...
Yeah, I thought that was a kind of crazy response when Thomas Massey said that. I said, oh, he's going to go on a record to just say it just like that. I mean, he's known to vote Republican, you know, but he has been quoting AOC and Jasmine Crockett the last couple weeks. So the reporter challenges him on that. And then he tries to kind of poke fun and say, you know, when are you going to switch your party? When are you coming over to the Democrats? And that's when Thomas Massey talks about, I vote Republican 91% of the time, but the 9% I don't. And I was like, wow, I just thought that was very brazen of him to just come out and say it.
Just throwing this in here because I think we forgot about this, but Donald Trump was called Hitler to his face. And we all know he doesn't like to be called pedophile president or Hitler.
Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free DC! Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! Free DC! Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time!
Man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna just be honest and say it. Some of these people, I don't think, like, they should I was gonna say they should read Hitler's memoir, but that probably won't do them any good. But these people, I really wish they could just spend some time under Hitler. Like, sometimes the stuff that they say, like, they're like, Donald Trump is the Hitler of our time, and I'm like, no, Donald Trump doesn't come close to Hitler. But I think it's very interesting that people always portray him right next to him. And I'm just like, dude, people, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's their trauma kicking in or what, but I'm just saying, like, Trump could be a lot of things. I don't put him next to Hitler. I'm sorry.
Free Palestine! Trump is the Hitler of our time! What do you want your legacy?
I mean, this was 3 months ago, and I kind of feel like if this were today, they would have been shot. Like, I think that's where we are now, is they wouldn't have been asked to leave. They would have been arrested or shot. Now, Kristi Noem wishes that she had a gun, I bet, when this happened.
Kristi Noem, any comment on the detention centers that look very much like concentration camps? You run concentration camps while you're taking a photo op with a baby. You're running concentration camps while you're taking a photo op with a baby. Shame. Have you no shame? Have you no shame? Have you no shame? You run open air. There's nothing worse than someone who uses a baby as a political tool while taking babies away from families. You cannot use a baby as a political tool while you take away the rights of families. How dare you? How dare you? Kristi Noem, how dare you? How dare you?
This is a very motivated reporter here. It's funny because he's surrounded around people and he's the main one he can hear. I'm not going to lie, though. He is spewing things that would probably make me stop and at least give him some attention. So the fact that she's not giving him any. I mean, she's probably good at just ignoring the press because after you do press conference after press conference, over time you get good at this. But I'm just saying, like, the dude's pretty consistent and he's pretty annoying at the same time.
You have the audacity to hold a child as you separate children from their families. You have separated numerous families. You should have shame. 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 Kristi Noem, have you no shame?
It's actually crazy to get yelled at repeatedly and to just ignore it. It's like people who live in their own filth and don't even see it. You know, no judgment, I guess, but I couldn't live like that. I also couldn't live like this. And this is, in its own way, living your own filth. When Kristi Noem is getting yelled at by someone for the crimes against humanity she is actively committing, and she doesn't even bother her. She can't even bother her. Look, at least Donald Trump, when he was being called Hitler, was like, huh? What? Kristi Noem, it doesn't even impact her. Now, this might, though. Kristi Noem, her impeachment is moving forward. There's a full list of sponsors now. Why this matters. Representative Robin Kelly, an Illinois Democrat, introduced articles of impeachment against Noem after a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, agent fatally shot Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old woman. Of course, we know that. The shooting was drawn scrutiny. Here's what to know. In total, at least 50 House Democrats have signed on to the articles, according to a list released by Kelly's office. The list was first reported by Axios. Her office told the outlet that more Democrats may sign on letter. I hope so. 50? 50? I think there's more than 200 House Democrats. Only 1/4, a quarter, 25% of House Democrats have signed on to articles of impeachment against Kristi Noem. That's actually absurd. It's offensive. Where are the fighters? Where are the fucking fighters? You know, I was asked if I was going to go, I was asked to go to a thing. I'm not going to blow up anyone's spot. Okay. I'm not going to blow up anyone's spot. I was asked to go to an event where there'd be some members of Congress, and they were like, do you have any questions for them before you go? And I was like, 1, I'm not going to go. 2, I do have a question for you. And it's why isn't the Democratic Party doing anything about the fascism that's literally here in our country? What is it going to take? All they know how to do is tweet. And I said, so I don't think you want me to go to your event. And they were like, yeah, probably for the best. And they're like, maybe we can use them in the future. Yeah. But that's kind of where I'm at. Is like, where the fuck is the action? I'm happy this is at least something. But 50 House Democrats? That's it? 50? 50. When we see ICE doing what it's doing to Americans in the street, and only 50 House Democrats say, yeah, I think we should probably remove the person who's letting it happen. Goes on to say here, the articles of impeachment may face an uphill battle, of course, because the GOP control.
Honestly, Keith, I'm not shocked that it's only 50. I'm really not. I mean, I get why he thinks it should be more, it would be. I'm not shocked. I do know that I said it on previous live streams, and I've said it numerous times, that there are a lot of people who are not happy with what they're seeing with ICE, but because the president had such a large mandate for immigration, it's like, I don't see as much pushback about, honestly, as I thought I would. I really thought there would be more because of how much we see. And don't get me wrong, people have definitely gotten upset. They've been pissed off. They're protesting. ICE vehicles have gotten destroyed. ICE property has gotten destroyed. But I just understand what he means when he's like, really, only 50. So it's like, yes, it's just not shocking. That's what President Trump ran on. That's what people, wanted to see. And said that was some people on the left as well, not just the right.
Old House Representatives, Republican leadership has still remained supportive of Kristi Noem and the administration overall. However, immigration remains a major issue ahead of the midterms, and Democrats may have more authority to advance such efforts if they were to take control of Congress in November. I just want fighters. I just want people who are going to fight. Now, Donald Trump, this is all impacting him. His support with Gen Z is just super underwater. It was plus 10 in 2025, and now it's dropped to negative 32. As Harry Jensen says here.
Really, with Gen Z? He said it was plus 10 and then it dropped to negative 32? Okay, let's listen to that again. Let's see what Keith covers. Because I actually didn't watch the whole clip in its entirety. Sometimes I get to it before I'm with you guys. Sometimes I don't. So let's see what he says. That's kind of crazy.
My house was broken into while I was at work. The police took a report, and I had to call my agent to file a claim.
Goodness gracious. Now it's dropped to his support with Gen Z is just super underwater. It was plus 10 in 2025, and now it's dropped to negative 32. As
let me just say, I think that number's ridiculously dumb. I'm just going to be honest. Plus 10 to negative 32. If any of this crap has to do with clavicular, saying things like Gavin Newsom, Moggs, JD Vance, I'm going to lose it. I literally am, because I don't understand. That's a crazy dip. It's I'm not surprised with Gen Z, because, it's Gen Z. That's all I'm going to say. But that's a crazy dip.
Harry Jensen says here, goodness gracious.
This morning, what about the kids? Perhaps no group swung more in the 2024 election than younger voters. They were decisive in Donald Trump's win. We've got new data this morning on what they think now. With us now, CNN Chief Data Analyst Harry Enton. there have been some pretty big shifts here.
Yeah, these guys are swingers. That's what we're talking about here. Take a look here. Generation Z. John liked that. Gen Z, party ID margin, Dems versus the GOP. In 2024, look at this. It was just a 6-point margin between the Democrats and Republicans. Democrats just led by 6 points. Very small. Remember, Donald Trump did very well for a Republican candidate amongst the youngest part of the electorate. But take a look here. 2025. Hello. A huge widening of the lead for Democrats among Generation Z, tripling their lead on party identification from 6 all the way up to 20. That was, in fact, the largest shift, considerably more so than any other group. Yes, there was a shift in the overall electorate, but this more than double the shift that we saw among the electorate.
I guess that's somewhat hopeful, right? Is that giving you hope? It's a little hopeful.
Large towards the Democratic Party.
Okay, we said it was decisive for Donald Trump. How?
Yeah, I would say if that's the way you want to vote, it is. It definitely is an indicator. I'm like 14 points is, and he said it's the largest out of any other group. I would say that that's pretty substantial. I just some of the interviews and the podcasts I'm seeing where Gen Z is talking about like why they want to vote for some of the people they want to vote for. And I don't have a super large Gen Z audience, honestly, guys. Like my I would say my concurrent viewers and my returning viewers, my largest part of my audience is from 55 to 65 plus. And if I go to a wider range, it's like 44 to 65 and plus. That's like 60% of my audience, right? So out of Gen Z, I probably only have about 13%, I think, the last time that I checked. So I don't get to talk to Gen Z much. Of course I have siblings, right, and I have people I work with that are Gen Z, and honestly I kind of see it across the board. For the most part, they really don't understand they don't really understand much about politics. I'm not gonna say it's all of them, it's just some of them. And it's like what they do understand about politics, it's so topical, and it's so stupid, if I'm honest with you. Like, when they give you some of the reasons why they want to vote for who they want to vote for, a lot of it is tied to, like, looks and weight and, like, the kind of wife the person has. And, I'm not necessarily saying these things are bad, because I said we have to look at it from both ends of the spectrum. For younger people, I get why they're saying that, because to them, they want a young, handsome, strong leader. To them, that represents, power, and it represents, something to the world. And who said it? I don't think it was Sneeko who said it. I think it was Clavicular who said it. He was like, when he was talking about why he would vote for Gavin Newsom over J.D. Vance, he just was like, who would want a fat president? And I was like, wow, who would want a fat president?
How have opinions shifted toward Donald Trump among this group?
Okay, so this, in some ways, you might say this doesn't necessarily apply to Donald Trump. It absolutely does apply to Donald Trump. He has just fallen off a cliff when it comes to Generation Z. Look at this. Donald Trump's net approval rating in February of 2025. John said it right. Wow.
This was actually a month into the administration.
This was a month into the administration. He was at plus 10 points on the net approval rating. He was on the right side of the ledger. Look at this. Falling off that cliff. That is a drop of 42 points to negative 32 points on the net approval rating.
I'll take it. I will take any good news wherever I can, but obviously what's happening in this country, not popular, not supported by a vast majority of Americans. I wish Democrats would get on board.
Yeah, I just would say they're not mad enough. That's what it is with Democrats. All right, guys, let's jump to the next clip.
We'll cut to the chase.
All right, next up, we got Mr. Bill O'Reilly. Shout out to Bill O'Reilly, channel favorite. We watch him often over here covering how the states are rebelling against the president.
Since the beginning of time, humans have been trimming their nails. So, why do...
I wrote a column, posted on BillO'Reilly.com, filed it on Saturday, called The Rebellion. So there are 8 states that are rebelling against the federal government's immigration law. I will list them in a moment. Okay? And what does that mean? It just means they refuse to obey the law. That's a rebellion. This is the sanctuary city movement, but it's more than that. Okay. So on Saturday, you saw one of those states, Minnesota, host a demonstration against the ICE shooting of last week. A couple of thousand people showed up, and there's nothing wrong with people protesting. That's what we do in America when we think something is wrong. But this protest was sponsored by a far-left group called the Minnesota Immigration Rights and Action Committee. This was an ideological protest, not an organic protest, okay? It was organized exclusively by the far left to seek people's presence on the far left. That's what this was all about. Okay. Authorities in Minneapolis arrested 29 people, and they were throwing chunks on the far left. That's what this was all about. Okay. Authorities in Minneapolis arrested 29 people, and they were throwing chunks of ice and other debris at the local cops. Feds had no presence here. So a local demonstration. Chunks of ice and other on the far left. That's what this was all about. Okay. Authorities in Minneapolis arrested 29 people, and they were throwing
29 people, that's a good amount. I mean, we do realize this, though, right? When we see this happening, you can't throw chunks of ice and rocks and things like that at police vehicles and ice, right? Like, I get, even if we are pissed off at them, like, it's like, dude, that you can't do things like that. If, like, people need to understand things like that. Now, I'm not talking in reference to the young lady that got shot. I'm just talking about, like, the protesters. You know, it's not peaceful protesting if you're throwing, like, ice rocks and things like that at police vehicles and at ICE. Like, that's not a peaceful protest.
chunks of ice and other debris at the local cops. Feds had no presence here. So a local demonstration. All right? And one police officer was hurt. That's the who, what, when, where, and why of the rally. The people who attended the rally are in one category. They are leftists who hate the Trump administration. Roll the tape.
There was another instance of someone in our city being killed, being murdered by law enforcement, and I'm ready to be done with it.
I love my community, I love my city, and I hate what's happening to it with people who frankly aren't from here coming in and telling us who should be here. And when it comes down to loving my neighbor, I'm just going to love my neighbor.
Here's ICE riding through our neighborhoods, destroying families, destroying businesses, tearing our communities apart, and they're not being held accountable. And that's why we're here. We're out here to demonstrate, to try to hold them accountable.
Okay, fine. But that's not what really that is. That is an open border. We don't want any law enforcement to confront undocumented migrants. We don't want it. You let them in, they do what they want. That's what these people stand for. But they're never honest about it. That shouldn't be a surprise. 75 million people voted for Kamala Harris, who supported President Biden's open border policy and didn't want any law enforcement against people, foreign nationals who came into the country illegally. Kamala Harris wouldn't have done anything. Would have continued on the open border and let people just wave on it. Okay?
And that's what people forget, and that's what I appreciate Bill O'Reilly. He talks about both sides, even if he doesn't care too much for the left. 75 million people did vote for Kamala Harris. That's the reason why we see people throwing stuff at ICE vehicles. That's exactly the reason why, because there were a group of people that did not want this. They didn't want people coming from other countries to be scrutinized or ostracized. They wanted them to come here and be able to be left alone, right? So that's the reason why we are seeing what we're seeing, because as well as there was a mandate for President Trump, there were also people saying, hey, we don't really want this guy to come in office, and on top of that, some of the policies he's going to come with.
75 million Americans voted for her. A lot of folks. Of course you're going to have that. Now, the 8 states in open rebellion are these: California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, Minnesota, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. New York and Vermont are right on the edge there. I don't have them on here because there's a dialogue, at least, going on with Washington, but you can put them on there. And when you have 10 states, it's basically telling the federal government, we're not going to obey your law. You have what they had before the Civil War. It's exactly the same thing. And I make the point in the column that from 1830 to 1860, 30 years, Southern states said, we're not going to obey whatever you say. And we're not just talking slavery, we're talking tariffs, we're talking almost everything. Andrew Jackson slapped them down. Okay? But then we had a series of weak presidents like Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan who let the South rise in ferocity. And then we had the Civil War. That was a rebellion against the federal government. Only other time in our history we've seen this was during the Vietnam War. But that was a populist uprising. Started out ideological.
That's the funny thing, because those two presidents, Bill O'Reilly has compared President Trump to them, but just a little different. He says that he has been more overzealous than Andrew Jackson, which is kind of crazy, right? If you know Andrew Jackson's history with Congress. And then he also says that, President Trump has also been deemed as probably one of the presidents in American history that is a loose cannon, right? Or is not to say the worst. He puts Biden next to James Buchanan, which is crazy, but I get why he says that. A lot of people would say James Buchanan was one of the worst because he allowed civil war to take place within his own country, right? So I just think it's crazy that he's put Biden next to James Buchanan and he's put Donald Trump as overzealous as Andrew Jackson. I just think that's hilarious.
Logical. But then the war got out of control because of Lyndon Johnson's incompetency and deceit. And the American people, and that just cut across almost every barrier, said enough of this. And the demonstrations happened. And violence happened. Kent State, National Guard, and a lot of other areas. Now, the federal government at this point has a couple of obligations. Has to enforce the law. Has to. But they can de-escalate violent confrontations. So if ICE agents see that there's a person like Ms. Good impeding their investigation with an automobile, the vehicle, then you de-escalate that. You arrest her later, which they could have done easily. All right? You don't up it, because if there's a lot more violence, then the Trump administration is going to lose the country. It's going to. You got to de-escalate in any kind of potential violent situation. Now, that doesn't mean if the ICE agents are attacked that they can't fight back. They should fight back. I'm not saying that. But if you can lessen potential violence, you have to do that. And that's not just me saying it, that's every law enforcement agency in the country has that in their manual. Okay, if you don't have to use lethal force, you don't. Get it later. Do it later. Now that's number one. Number two, 77 million Americans voted for Donald Trump. And that vote needs to be respected. It's not respected by the left. Okay, it's not. And there's probably a vice versa on that too. But when 77 million Americans say we want immigration law enforced, you got to enforce it. So the Trump administration is not doing anything wrong theoretically. Okay? But the ICE commanders got to know that this is a volatile situation. Because if it gets worse, the Democrats are going to win the midterms. And they're making their stand not on the economy now, because the economy is pretty good. They're making their stand on this. This is the hill. They're going to force it. So Trump.
So I just wanted to go back because I actually think Bill O'Reilly touches on a very good point here when he talks about why he thinks President Trump would lose the country or why the Republicans would lose the midterms. Just listen to what he says here about particularly the violence with ICE.
The administration's not doing anything wrong theoretically. Okay? But the ICE commanders got to know that this is a volatile situation. Because if it gets worse, the Democrats are going to win the midterms. And they're making their stand not on the economy now, because the economy is pretty good. They're making their stand on this. This is the hill they're standing on. Illegal immigration. I think that's foolish. I believe most Americans see this Minnesota stuff for what it is. A provocation of the federal government, a rebellion against social order. I believe most of us see that. And the Democratic Party is standing opposed to that. It's going to hurt them, particularly because it's a weak party with no leader. But if you are calling ICE Gestapo and you are supporting open borders and no supervision of foreign nationals, and you won't even cooperate in the 10 states that I mentioned with criminal migrant investigations, you wouldn't even cooperate then, America's going to walk away from you, in my opinion. You wouldn't even of foreign nationals, Gestapo, and you are supporting open borders and no supervision of foreign nationals, and you won't even cooperate in the 10 states that I mentioned with criminal migrant investigations, you wouldn't even cooperate then, America's going to walk away from you, in my opinion. Summing up, the federal government has to enforce immigration law, but it has to be done a little bit differently now, in my opinion. The Democratic Party is standing opposed to that. It's going to hurt them, particularly because I believe most of us see that. And the Democratic Party is standing for immigration. I think that's foolish. I believe most Americans see this Minnesota stuff for what it is. Immigration. I think that not on the economy now, because the economy is pretty good. They're making their stand on this. This is the hill they're standing on. Illegal immigration. I think that's foolish. I believe most Americans see this Minnesota stuff for what it is. A provocation of the federal government.
It's good. I wanted to go back to that because Bill O'Reilly is telling the Democrats, like, if this is what you're going to run off of, he said he doesn't think that it's a smart thing for them to do. You know, he thinks that ultimately the American people are going to see the stuff happening in Minnesota for what it is, and that the Democratic Party will lose still the American people even in the midterms, because they'll come to their senses and they'll say, even the sanctuary cities, listen, he just talked about Kamala Harris having 75 million votes, right? And Donald Trump having 77, 78. So still what the people want, they still put that person in office, right? We're going to see the protesters with ICE. I think that that's normal because of how many people did vote for Kamala Harris. It's safe to say everybody didn't want Trump to be the president. So when we see the opposition towards ICE, that shouldn't be shocking. The violence, I don't think many of us were expecting that part. But when he says that if the Democrats try to build, you know, their next candidacy on immigration, like the violence of ICE towards illegal immigrants, he feels like that's sinking sand, that's not something that they should do.
A rebellion against social order. I believe most of us see that. And the Democratic Party is standing opposed to that. It's going to hurt them, particularly because it's a weak party with no leader. But if you are calling ICE Gestapo and you are supporting open borders and no supervision of foreign nationals, and you won't even cooperate in the 10 states that I mentioned with criminal migrant investigations, you wouldn't even cooperate then, America's going to walk away from you, in my opinion. Sum it up, the federal government has to enforce immigration law, but it has to be done a little bit differently now. Situation is just too volatile. We don't want dead people. Don't. But we do want people held accountable. And that's the memo. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube.
Yeah, he makes a good point. They are going to have to do some type of adjustment because it's way too volatile, you know? And we don't want dead people. That wasn't the mandate. There might have been a mandate for, immigration, but it wasn't a mandate for American citizens losing their lives, So that's going to be something that they're definitely going to have to readjust. All right, guys, let's jump to the next clip. So we got CBS Morning News covering more news about President Trump in Greenland. Let's take a listen. This is an update.
But President Trump insists. President Trump is doubling down on his demands for U.S. control of Greenland. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with the foreign ministers of Greenland and Denmark. That NATO ally has controlled the island since 1814. But President Trump insists the U.S. needs it for national security. Nancy Cordes is at the White House with the latest. Nancy, good morning to you. What can you tell us?
Good morning. This was a meeting for the Danes and the Greenlanders to basically look at the vice president face to face and tell him that they want to keep their land. They want to work with President Trump, but that they don't plan to give up territory. That was not good enough, however, for President Trump.
The president has made his view clear, and we have a different position.
That was Denmark's foreign minister after a highly unusual meeting with Vice President Vance and the Secretary of State. Denmark requested the meeting in response to mounting threats from President Trump about his plans to take over Greenland, which is a longtime Danish territory.
We are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
In the meeting, the Danes reiterated that the Arctic territory is not for sale, though they welcome a U.S. presence there. At one point, the U.S. had 10,000 troops stationed in Greenland, but the numbers have dwindled to 200.
We want to work with our American friends and allies, but it must be a respectful cooperation and it must respect the red lines.
Trump has coveted the massive territory with a tiny population since his first term. He now says Greenland is vital to the Golden Dome defense system he wants to build.
If we don't go in, Russia's going to go in and China's going to go in. And there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it, but we can do everything about it.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle seem unconvinced.
And the United States is the one that actually has a military presence in Greenland already.
Denmark, like the U.S., is a member of NATO and a U.S. ally for more than 200 years.
I don't know if you would call what the United States has in Greenland a military presence, right? So we went from, at one point, 10,000 military personnel to about 200. We went from 17 military bases to, I think they have one active one out there now. So I wouldn't say that there's a military presence there. I would say that there's military friendlies. And yeah, absolutely. With that amount of U.S. presence there, if China or Russia goes in, there wouldn't be a thing Denmark could do about it.
I've yet to hear from this administration a single thing we need from Greenland that the sovereign people is not ready and willing to grant us.
Danish officials have rejected Trump's claims that they are leaving Greenland vulnerable to threats from China and Russia. But in a bid to head off those claims, they did announce that they are stepping up military exercises in Greenland. And in a show of solidarity, French President Emmanuel Macron announced he's going to be sending troops too.
All right, Nancy, thank you very much.
President Trump is now making a new and serious threat after protests in Minneapolis grew even more chaotic overnight. And there was another shooting involving a federal agent.
Another shooting involving federal agents. So we don't love CNN over here, but we're just watching it just so we can gather the facts, just like we're watching every other one. So don't come for me, chat. Believe me, it's not my favorite platform at all. But let's take a listen.
Agent allegedly ambushed. The president posting this, we'll put it up for you, saying that if Minnesota's politicians don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE, I will institute the Insurrection Act. So that could lead to him deploying U.S. troops on U.S. soil in that state. Elena, let me start with you. This has now been taken to a whole new level by the president with this threat. What are you hearing about this?
Yeah, this is a very big deal, and I should know that this is something we've heard President Trump, of course.
I mean, I know they're not going to like it, but at the end of the day, President Trump is like, listen, the ICE agents are there to do a job. And, like, you guys can peacefully protest, but destroying their vehicles, throwing ice and rocks at them, doing violent things, this is no longer a peaceful protest. So I think that's why we see President Trump taking that stance, because if it's violence and things are getting destroyed and people are getting hurt, then it isn't a peaceful protest.
Threatened in the past. He did so during his first term, particularly around the George Floyd protests that had erupted in 2020.